Hello, and welcome back to WP Reflections, where we speak with some of the amazing members of the William Patterson alumni community about their time on campus and catch up on what they're up to now. This season, we are speaking with people whose time on campus includes both their college and current professional careers. They are some of the many Pioneer alumni who are working across our campus as faculty and staff to teach and support the next generation of students. Our guest today is Dr. Pam Brillante. Dr. Brillante earned her BA in Special Education from William Patterson in 1988 and her MED in Curriculum and Instruction, Early Childhood Education in 1992. She holds an EDD from Rowan University. She returned to her alma mater in 2000 as an adjunct professor while still working as a public school special education teacher, packed schedule. Today, she is a full professor and is a recognized expert in her field, including through her appointment by Governor Murphy to New Jersey's State Special Education Advisory Council as a public representative for higher education programs. Her deep connection to William Patterson and its history include the legendary Billy Pat's Pub, which we'll ask her more about. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to ask 8 questions since I'm the 8th president of William Patterson.
Okay.
Some more in depth, some in the lightning round. Are you ready?
Yes.
So you've talked about how, as a student, you had wonderful opportunities like presenting at a national conference, thanks to the late Dr. Leola Hayes. Now you are following in her footsteps, providing your own students with chances to attend conferences and study abroad, having recent alumni contribute to your latest book, and mentoring graduates on how to teach as adjuncts in your program. Tell me more about this wonderful through line of mentorship and how you are paying it forward.
I think Dr. Hayes really did change the whole trajectory of my career. She really believed in us, and it was one of those relationships that I think was just foundational for my whole, for every part of me. I didn't believe, that I could be a professor, that I had something to say. I was going to be a teacher. I was going to be a nice, quiet, little suburban teacher, and, all of that. I didn't expect to be, a name in my field or, someone who, presented and wrote books and things like that. And that was all because of Leola Hayes. Mm-hmm. And she was a remarkable woman. She had earned a doctorate in the 1960s from Alabama. She was an African-American woman.
Alabama, wow.
Yeah, and so she earned a doctorate, and she was so knowledgeable, and she was so influential in all of our lives. She ran the statewide Student Council for Exceptional Children, and she got us all involved and brought us to conferences. I did not realize until I was faculty here that she paid for us out of her own pocket. She would take about 6 of us every year to San Francisco. We went to New Orleans and went to conferences and spoke at conferences. So I found that just a remarkable experience, and I wanted that for my own students.
It just sort of reinforces it takes that one person to say, hey, you're smart, you can do this, and it just changes your life, right? And we have so many faculty who are doing that great work still on campus. So, before we began, you were saying, it was shocking to you to sort of look back, 40 years since you were an undergraduate. But let's take some time and look back at during your undergraduate career, and tell us a little bit about why you chose William Patterson.
Honestly, this was the only place I was not going to come.
Really?
Because I grew up about 3 blocks away in North Haledon. So I used to have to pass the entrance to William Patterson to get to my public high school. So I was a townie.
Right.
And I was not going to come here. Nope. So the universe laughed at me when I said that. And I've been here ever since.
Wow. And what was it about William Patterson that made you decide to finally come?
I started out as a political science major. I wanted to I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to work in public policy and things like that. So that was really my field. And I've met some great professors over there, and Carol Sheffield, who just recently retired. Yeah. She was one of my professors who was influential. And so, it was it was a wonderful program over there. So, but
How did you stumble into special education then?
that I know, really, none of those
Right?
credits
No.
transferred. I actually got a part-time job, just had great hours. It was at the Eastern Christian Children's Retreat in Wyckoff, which was a residential facility for children with significant intellectual disabilities and multiple physical disabilities. And, plenty of the nursing students were working there. My friends were nursing students. So they were working there, and then I started working in the recreation department. So, and then it was, I kind of like this. So I did change my major, and none of those credits transferred into the new major.
There you go. I think, education is still one of those majors that it's hard to, if you start somewhere else, to move into. It's getting easier, but it hasn't always been the case, right?
What was great back then was special ed was its own major.
Right.
Like right now, it's just an additional endorsement to a general ed major. But I had 30 credits in special education, which I really felt that I was prepared to be a teacher.
That leads beautifully into the next question. So the field of special education has changed a lot as we've learned more about how to meet the unique needs of all students and help everyone meet their true potential. As someone who is teaching the next generation of special education teachers, what do you think is the most important thing for your students to understand about the population that they will serve and the demands of their careers that they're preparing for?
To me, it's always been about relationships, and I learned that from Dr. Hayes, that it's, there's a saying, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, because it doesn't impact everyone the same way. So you have to get to know that child, that student in your classroom, and really understand their learning needs and just how they fit into the world, right? How their disability impacts them every waking minute. Yeah. So that actually takes me into my current classrooms, like into the graduate school classes that I teach. I'm working with people who are teaching full-time, moms, very busy schedules, and I'm trying to, have them unlearn some bad habits, about students with disabilities.
We always frame pedagogy around teaching and not learning.
Right.
And if we really framed pedagogy around how students learn versus how we teach, I think it could really change the dynamic. Maybe before we retire that will happen. So, of course, I don't want to bury the lead. Pioneer alumni who experienced Billy Pat's Pub wouldn't forgive me if I didn't ask you about your work there. So, first, for the uninitiated, explain what Billy Pat's was and tell me about your involvement and how that fit in with your other extracurricular activities on campus.
Well, Billy Pat's was legendary, and it was the pub on campus. We actually had a pub that served alcohol on campus. I'm old enough to, when I started college, the drinking age was 18. And it did gradually, before I graduated, it was 21. But it was a really centralized location on Thursday nights. That was the big night. Thursday nights, yes.
Wow.
And it was very difficult to have a Friday morning 8 a.m. class.
If you made it.
And our major decided that we were going to be professional educators, and so they scheduled mandatory senior classes
At 8.
At 8 o'clock on Friday morning.
Wow.
So there was lots of hoodies and ponytails and still stamps on your hand.
I can imagine.
But it was a wonderful place to meet everyone across campus. Yeah. So the commuters came, the residents came. It was right in the student center.
It is the most talked about space of alumni, in my travels around the country. But I think, what you alluded to, and you alluded to in your conversation about Dr. Hayes, is that it's relationships, right? That's where relationships were formed. You met people from different, disciplines, different walks of life, residence halls, commuters. Like, where does that happen on campus? It happens at Billy Pat's Pub. So now for the lightning round, I'm going to get short responses to 4 questions.
Okay.
So what would the title of your autobiography be?
It shook his snow globe. It came from a former student who told me once that I shook his snow globe.
Oh.
So, right, in my disability studies class, because the assignment was to listen for someone who said the R word, the word retarded, in conversation, and record how you felt and how, because we were learning about how disability impacts people. And a student said that his mother had said the word, and it stopped him in his tracks. And he said he had heard the word a million times over the years with his friends, but to hear his mother say it and have learned about the power of those words, he said it shook his snow globe.
That's a great title.
So yes.
So what's the biggest change that you've noticed at William Patterson from the time that you studied here to your time teaching here?
I think special education has changed just statewide, and what we know about students with disabilities and inclusion of students with disabilities in general ed classes and, in society. So that's been a big change. But I think the relationship piece has changed. I think I right now, I teach all online. So that's I'm on campus a lot. I live in town. But teaching all online has really made a difference with relationships. So
it's interesting to watch those students, though, those online students show up for commencement.
Yes.
And, they're hugging their professors often for the first time. It truly is a great moment. And they're really beginning to engage as alumni, too, so that's exciting.
Yes.
So besides the Friday 8 a.m. after you were at the pub until late, what was your toughest class at WP?
Dr. John Rosengren in anatomy and physiology. So we had to take the nursing student version of it.
Oh, no.
So it was my first experience with differentiated instruction, where he'd be like, all right, you guys don't have to worry about this. Nursing majors, this is, and then, okay, girls, let's go.
So what is the single best piece of advice that you could give today's students, no matter their major?
I think it goes back to relationships again.
Yeah.
And it's really about being involved. Even if you are a commuter, even if you are a, online student, you can still be involved. You can still have relationships with professors.
Yeah.
We seek that because that's where we came from.
Yeah.
Just having that, even Zoom.
Right.
Zoom,
It is changing the conversation at the university around what does student engagement mean, right? Because if you have this online population, what engagement means for them versus a traditional face-to-face student is very different. And, we have a lot of adult learners now. What does that engagement mean for them versus the traditional student coming right out of high school and moving into college? So it just keeps saying that education keeps changing, it keeps evolving, it keeps, moving forward. So thanks for taking time to speak with me today. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing at the state and national level around special education and education in general. We need it now more than ever, as you know. But it was really great to have some time with you today and talk about your time as a student and now your time as a professor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Have a great day on campus.
Thanks.